Raskin.
Mr. Whitaker, before you took the call from President Trump, you had a fascinating career. Owned a daycare center, a concrete supply business, trailer sales, GOP activist, U.S. attorney who unsuccessfully prosecuted Iowa's first openly gay state legislator on trumped-up Hobbs Act charges that were dismissed by the jury in about an hour, Senate candidate. There have been some scandals, too. Here's one. Trump's acting attorney general involved in firm that scammed veterans out of life savings. Veteran says, "I spent the money on a dream. I lost everything." But the newspapers say you struck gold when you arrived in Washington, which the president calls the swamp. Here's one that tells the story. Conservative nonprofit with obscure roots and undisclosed funders paid Matthew Whitaker $1.2 million. According to the Washington Post, in the 3 years after he arrived in Washington, Whitaker received more than $1.2 million as the leader of a charity that reported having no other employees. That's a pretty good deal. Now, what was the name of the charity that you ran, Mr. Whitaker?
Congressman, you've mentioned a lot in your...
No, but I'm asking you a very specific question. What was the name of the charity?
You have challenged my character.
No, I'm asking you a question. I control this time, Mr. Whitaker. If you want to ask the chairman for time of your own, you can do it. This is my time. Mr. Whitaker, you don't run this committee. You don't run the Congress of the United States, and you don't run the Judiciary.
Gentleman will suspend. The gentleman is correct. The witness will answer the questions, and it's up to the gentleman to decide what questions. The gentleman will continue. We'll resume.
What was the title of the not-for-profit that you ran?
What time period, sir?
What was the last title? I know it changed its name 3 different times, right? What was the final name?
While I was employed as the executive director, it was called the Foundation for Accountability and Civic Trust.
Did you name it?
I did. Actually, you know,
those are highly noble goals, accountability and civic trust. So let's talk about some accountability and civic trust. Mr. Whitaker, I've got a question for you.
No, you asked me a question.
I asked you a question. I control the floor, Mr. Whitaker. You don't understand.
Now, the gentleman is correct. The gentleman controls the time, and if he wishes, as many members have done on occasion, they make a statement, they don't even ask a question, but if he wishes to proceed to another question, it's his time.
But Congressman, I do not feel, Mr. Chairman, I do not feel like my answer would be complete on the record.
It's up to the
question he asked.
Okay, Mr. Whitaker, see if you can get into this. Tell us where the money came from that you were paid, the $1.2 million that you were paid before you went to the Department of Justice. I'm asking my question.
Mr. Chairman, point of order, which overrules your question. Point of order.
The gentleman will explain his point. The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman will state his point of order.
Look, we're going to go down this probably many more times, but again, if you wanted to do a confirmation hearing, this is not under the scope of this hearing. This is not a confirmation hearing and is not shown to be a...
Mr. Chairman, this goes to...
The gentleman's point of order is not well taken. The gentleman, the gentleman from Maryland has the discretion to ask the questions. The gentleman will proceed.
Appeal the ruling of the chair.
The gentleman has appealed the ruling of the chair. The gentlelady has moved to table. All in favor of the motion to table the appeal of the ruling of the chair will vote aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Aye. The ayes have it. The ruling of the motion is tabled.
Mr. Chairman, can you and I engage in a colloquy? Can we suspend the clock and you and I engage in a colloquy?
We're in the
middle
middle of the
point of order, Mr. Chairman. Is the ranking member just going to continue to interrupt when he doesn't like the flow of questions?
Excuse me.
I'll probably make a point of order when that needs to be made.
Right now, good if it'd be useful if it was actually a point of order.
Everyone will please suspend. The gentleman made a point of order. It was ruled out of order. Right now, the gentleman has the time. If the ranking member wants to make a point, I'll recognize him after the gentleman is completed. The gentleman will resume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been reported publicly that there was one donor. And as we understand it, I think you're testifying today that you were the sole employee of the group. So there was one donor and one employee. Do you know who the donor was to the group that funded your salary for $1.3 million?
Yes, I do.
Who was the donor?
The donor was another nonprofit 501c3 organization called the Donors Trust.
Okay, now that was the pass-through vehicle, but who reached into their pocket and wrote the check to go through that to pay your salary?
Congressman, as you know, because you've looked at this issue, the Donors Trust is much bigger than the Foundation for Accountability and Civic Trust and raises millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars every year. I actually, as I sit here today, have no idea who the donors to Donors Trust that then funded
thank you.
the
All right,
foundation.
well then I've got a theory that I want to float with you, and it goes to something very strange that's been happening at the Department of Justice recently. A casino billionaire and magnate Sheldon Adelson hates online gambling for obvious reasons. It's competition for him. He wants people in the casinos, not online. And he spent more than $1 million lobbying Congress to override a 2000 opinion by the Office of Legal Counsel at DOJ, saying that the Wire Act plainly prohibits only sports gambling online, not gambling in the states, which is why Florida, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, lots of states have built important businesses for themselves online. But Congress wouldn't change the law according to the demands of Mr. Adelson. So rather than change the law, he decided to try to get the Department of Justice to change the interpretation of the law. And he threw millions into a campaign to remake the DOJ and get the Office of Legal Counsel to perform a complete reversal and say that the Wire Act bans the kinds of lotteries that states run online, even though its language plainly prohibits only sports betting. And when Donald Trump won and Mr. Sessions became AG and you became Chief of Staff, DOJ leadership ordered a reevaluation of this legal question. And what do you know? The Office of Legal Counsel found some subtle and invisible points of law that apparently escaped the Department of Justice back in 2011, and it reversed the plain reading of the interpretation, which talks specifically about sports betting. Now, were you involved in that decision?
Congressman, the General Sessions was recused at the time that decision came out.
So were you recused too?
Therefore, I was recused, and so I was not involved in that decision.
Did you ever talk to Sheldon Adelson about it?
No, I've actually never met Sheldon.
Okay, did you talk to any of his lobbyists about it?
No, I did
Did you
not.
talk to Charles Cooper about it?
No, but I do know Charles Cooper, and I would point out one of the things, Mr. Raskin.
Well,
it's
look,
very
if you
important.
can ask
It's
the chairman for
it's when
time,
the
but I
opinion-
can't give you my time. Forgive me, we only have 5 minutes here.
OLC
So-
opinion came out.
The gentleman controls the time. At the conclusion of his
the
statement,
chairman not want
at
the
the
witness to give
conclusion,
full answers?
at the conclusion of his 5 minutes, I will afford
Okay.
the witness some time, but the gentleman controls the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In January and February of 2018, the chairman and vice chairman of Wild Rose Casino and Resorts, a casino in Iowa, each donated $2,600 to your Senate campaign, which was over 4 years before when you lost that campaign. How did these casino operators come to donate to your campaign several years after you lost? Did you talk to them?
Time of the gentleman has expired. The witness may answer the question.
To answer your question specifically, no, I did not. To go back to the other point I'd like to make, Congressman, is that the first OLC opinion that preceded the one we just issued in November was done, and the state of Illinois provided a white paper regarding the position on the Wire Act. And so I think it is very consistent, and your inference that somehow that process was corrupted or corrupt is absolutely wrong, and the premise of your question I reject.